Today I'm going to talk about Golang Interface, advanced concept, that is expose method using interface. I have used interface in the project, like the day 3 project. You can find that in a playlist, create project using Golang, Java and Spring. So at day 3 I have used heavily this kind of interface, and that seems a little bit difficult if you have not worked on interface. So let's see how interface works in case of exposing method. So let's see this with one example. Here there is a project example 1, and what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a package. So let's see, new folder, and let's see, there's a package called student, and let's create another package, teacher. Okay, now under student I'm going to create a file, so student go, and let's create teacher go also. Teacher go. Okay, that looks good. So under student go, let's say that this is the package student, so it's a package student, and now create a struct type student, and it's a struct, and let's define 3 fields here. One is id, and let's say int, and then name, string, fee, float 64. So that struct is created now, and then let's create a function. So that function, whatever I'm going to create, I want to make that function as a part of this struct. So how to do that? Like what we do that, first write function, and then you use this struct here and give one name, like let's say s. Now we'll create the function name. So function name, I'm saying okay, display, like display id. So it's going to display the id. Save it, and what I do, I'll just display the id. So for that I want to use the printf, so let's import the printf. So I imported here, and now let's print that fmt and printf. What we can do, we can use the s, and then if I do s and if I do dot, I can see the fee id name, all these variables. Since this is the part of this function is the part of a struct student, we can see all the variables, and this is the way how we include this function as a part of the struct. So this is the way. So let's say that okay, display let's say here id, or let's say student id equal to, let's say s dot id, and in the similar way we can display all 3 fields here. Okay, that's its name, and you can also change this to name, and that's the student fee, and here is dot fee. Okay, so that's good. Now our function display id is ready, and this is under package student. Let's call that in a main function. So there is no main, let's create a main. So example 1, right click, and there's new file here, and create main.go. I will come here, main go, and then it's a package name. So this is a different package, and I'm going to call a student in this package. So let's import first. So import, and where is this? This is under example1. So let's start from example1, and then under that the package name is a student. So it's a student here. Main, and come here and create the object for that. So how will you create the object? We'll say that okay, is, let's say, new variable, and then student. And if I do dot, so if my import path is good, you know, it can auto, like this auto complete. So if I do the dot, you can it can show what's the struct name. So student, and then student, and under that I want to initialize the value for that ID, and let's say I'll just give the ID, and it's not like giving that ID here. It's not showing the ID, so that means we cannot access the ID here. So in order to access the ID, first thing is this is in lowercase, so that's a private. If you want to expose outside, then I have to give ID like this, I upper. And now I'll just save this and then come back main, and here let's see if I give the ID. No, now we can see ID here, so it's showing the ID. So we need the ID, and then give the value for this. So let's say 10. In the similar way, if I want to give the name, I cannot see the name because the name is a private. It's not a public. Okay, so for now let's use the ID, and let's print that thing. So what I do is S is the object. So if I do the S, now you can see the display ID here, and it's also showing the ID because ID is also public, and display ID, that function is in upper. So let's call this, run this now. Okay, I'm here. Let's see. So come here and this example one, and then let's go run main. Start ID is undefined. Where is the start ID? Let's see. Student. Okay, so we made this in uppercase. So, and this is the lower here. That's what's complaining. Made that upper and run again. Come here. Let's see. Okay, this time student ID. Okay, this format is not good. So again, for the printf you can use different, but just for now, just use the println for now. The printf we can use the %d. Yeah, for now just use the println. Let's run once again. Okay, now we can see student ID 10, name, we didn't pass anything for the name. Student fee is 0, we didn't initialize that value also, so that's why we see in this way. So yeah, so this is not the good way to see like the variable outside. So let's make it, you know, the lowercase. So if I make it lowercase ID and this ID, then I cannot access that, we know that. So let's save this, come back here, and I cannot initialize the ID like this. So if I run, it will give me the error. So come back here and terminal, and I'm going to run and see, cannot refer unexported field ID in Struct. So what is the other way we can initialize that that value? So let's create another function. So I'm just going to create a normal function. I do not want to put that function under a student, so that's why I'm not going to pass a student here. So I will say that okay, new student, and that's the function, and where I pass three things like ID, then name, then fee, and what this function will return is the student. So it's going to return student. So I'll say that's it will return a student, and then here I will say it's return, and I will create the object for the student. So it's a student, and then under this, if I give ID comes here, ID and colon, and in this ID, this is ID of this field is under the student. So I'm going to initialize this field with this ID, whatever we pass in a new student. Okay, in the similar way, name, and then this name, CP, and CP. Okay, that's good. We did this. Now we call this function in a main. So let's call this function in a main here. So now that I'm going to initialize in a different way. So what I do now this time is it's a new this is under a student package, so I'll use the student, and then it's a new student, and new student I'm going to pass the ID and name is something you can put like John, let's say 150, and then run it now and let's see what is happening. Okay, still I can call the display ID. So in this way I created new student, I pass these values, and this will return the object of a student, and with the help of a student I can call display ID, and I can also call this. Oh, there is only one function, display ID. Let's change a little bit. Instead of printing everything under display ID, just print ID here and create like few more functions. So what I do, I'll just copy this and like 3 times. I'll copy this, and here this is going to print the student ID. I'll delete, and this is going to print the student. It's a display name. I'll remove this, and this is going to print the fee. So I'll remove this. Nice. Come back to main again, and I can do a start display fee. I can say display ID. Let's print that in a sequence. I can just say okay, display that name. Run this now. Good. We can see student ID, student name, and the fee. So everything is good now. So I think this is clear. We are just creating the object with the help of new student, and then we're displaying ID, name, and fee. Let's okay, so once we create the object in this way, we can display all the values, and if you observe this, we are exposing this function, display ID, display name, and display fee, all three functions in another package. It's a main. So these functions are in a package called student. Now I'm exposing that function in a other function. So that's why I can call all these function here. No, there is a different use case I'm thinking. So okay, let's see. I want to expose only ID and the name. I do not want to expose fee in another package. I'm thinking, okay, fee is some sensitive information, and I do not want to expose this function in another package. So what is the way I can do? So one way is I can say it says lowercase display, so display fee in a lowercase. So in that way I'm making it private. So private will not be good option every time. Sometimes we want to call the display fee in some package, but in other package we want to call only these two things. So how to achieve that? So in order to achieve that, we have to introduce something called interface. So let's use the interface and see how we can achieve our goal. So what I do, I will create the interface at the top. I say that okay, type student service student service, and it's the interface. And here I can mention what are the functions I want to expose outside of this package. So let's say I want to expose display ID, so I have to copy this thing. Like if there is a return type, I have to copy that also. So here there is no return type, so I'm just copying the function like this. I want to expose display name, so okay, it's a display name. So in this case, okay, display ID and the display name, that can be exposed outside, but how to do that? Okay, so let's we already created the interface here. Let's see how to do. So what I do, if I in a main function, I create the object, and somehow, you know, if I create let's see that. Let's write something. I'll just create the object for that interface. So the interface is under student, so student dot is a student service, and then so let's say it's a student service. Okay, now whatever the object I have created here, you know, I can do this thing in a different way. So let's comment it this for now. And what I do now, I will call this function, and I know this is going to, you know, return, it's going to return the object, but this time I'm going to hold that object in a interface here. So this interface like this, and you know, it will not complain this, you know, because student service, we have created the student service here, and there are two functions, and the student and if you see here, the student struct has implemented that two functions, display ID and display name. So that's why when we return the object and want this interface to hold that object, it will not complain, because we have already implemented display ID and display name. That's why in this case it will not complain. But see what is the difference. So this time I'm calling display ID. Okay, so how to do that? Okay, let's see, student service, and if I do the dot, okay, student service. So let's see what is the problem here. Student service, everything looks good. Is a spelling mistake or something? No. Okay, so this time I just want to call some function here. Let's see what is happening. Display ID, that's good. Display name, let's call that function, like, display ID, and see what it is complaining for. Oh, okay, there is a problem here. I did in a Java way. Okay, so in the Golang, what we have to do first, we have to define the variable, and then we have to give the type here. Okay, that's the problem. Okay, so now it's student service, and if I do dot, now see here, it's showing display ID and display name. It's not showing, you know, the display fee, because if you see the interface here, inside the interface, we have not given the display fee here. So that's the one. There are only two functions, so we are exposing only two functions through the interface. So that's why we can see only two functions here, display ID and display ID here, and then let's display name. So it's a display name. Okay, let's run this. Here is the terminal. Let's bring the terminal again. Open terminal here. Okay, run. Okay, go run and go. We'll still see, okay, student ID 10, student name John, but you cannot display the fee. So, you know, this is the good way of to expose the function outside of the package, whatever the functions required, so we can expose in that way. Now if you want to create, like if you want to expose the fee in the similar way, we can create another interface, and then we can give the name of that function. So okay, so for now it's working fine here. Let's make a little bit change now again. So we achieve our goal, like we already achieved our goal, exposing the function outside of the package. Let's do something similar things in a teacher Go. So yeah, so this is the package teacher, and then under this I'll create the struct again. So it's a type teacher, it's a struct. What I do here, I want to have like few fields, let's say ID and name. So ID, let's make it okay, that's good, ID, and then int name, so string. And this time what I want to do, I want to have, you know, other type also, like a student type here. So what I can do, yeah, I can say student, and then in order to get that struct here, I have to import. So import, and that's the example one, a student. Okay, so if I want to have student information in teacher, I can do this way, a student. So I can have, like, I can say student dot student struct. So we know, like, if this type is a student struct, so in that case we can call all the functions. In this way, you know, we are exposing all the function under the student. But we do not want to expose all the function. We want to expose few functions like ID and name. So in that case we have to use the interface. So instead of a struct, we can use the interface. But you can test that by yourself. But for now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use here student service. So in this way, when I pass some object to the student, it will expose only two functions, like ID and the display ID and the display name. So that's why I did this way. Okay, that's good. Now create the new function, so that with the help of that function we can create the object of the teacher. So what I do, new is a function, and it's a new teacher, and here I want to pass a few things. ID, so it's an int, and then name, it's a string, and the third one is I want to pass object, like this object. So let's say a student, and student dot student. So that is the struct. That's a struct. And what is this going to return is this teacher. So I'm going to say, so return the teacher. Now return, and let's create the object of the teacher and return that. So I'll say, okay, teacher, under this ID. So this ID, I'm going to assign this ID with whatever we are passing in a new teacher. So it's the ID here, and in similar way, name, it's name, that's good. And then a student, we know that's a interface. So in this interface, I'm going to assign the object itself. So in this way, like, I'm assigning the object in the interface. Type is interface. So that's why, you know, if I call this student object, I can only see two functions, display ID and display name, not a display fee. That's good. So we got this function. Now let's call that function in a main new teacher. So what I do, I have to import another package also, example one, and then teacher, and then let's say just type something, println teacher info like this. Let's import fmt also. Okay, so let's create the object for the teacher. So I'll say teacher, and then say but this should be lowercase, that's a package. So it's teacher, and say that teacher dot, or is there any example? Okay, example teacher. Now see the teacher dot, if I do, no, still it's not showing anything. Is that looks good? Okay, maybe let's do the T. So due to this type teacher, yeah, you can see the new teacher. Okay, new teacher, and in new teacher I'm passing the teacher ID. I'm going to pass teacher ID is, let's say 20, and name is something Hari. The name is Hari, and then we'll pass the object. Pass the object here, and that's object is the student service is that object. Okay, so in this case let's create another object here, or what? Yeah, let's create another object. So if you pass that student service, that's not going to work here, because in this function the type is a student. So type is a student, so it's expecting pass the type student. So if you want to pass a service, you can define that service here instead of a student. You can do that way, but let's use our original idea here. So I want to pass the object. So what we can do, if you want to pass the same object, we can do a little bit of different way. We can just create the object here, or so let's say std obj equal to that, and it's almost same, and I can pass this in this place. I can say that, okay, this object I'm assigning in a service, so everything good here also, there's no problem here. But in this case I can reuse my object. So I'm going to reuse the object. Here is std object. Okay, so now we pass everything here. Now if I do the t dot, there is not a function I can call here. So let's define a few function under the teacher. So under that object, so okay, let's see here in a teacher go, it will return the teacher, but since there is a no function associated with the teacher, it was not displaying anything. So I'm going to associate one function. So it's a function, and then I want to add that function under the teacher. I will do here like t and teacher, and then function name is, okay, let's say I'll say that, okay, display teacher. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to display all the information. I want to use the fmt, so let's import fmt, and here I do the t dot. Okay, let's do fmt printf, and then the teacher id. Oops, let's use the println. Okay, so it will go to the new line. So teacher id colon t and then id, teacher id, t dot id. So I printed that one, again fmt println, and I want to print teacher name, and do that t dot name. Okay, so we printed that. Let's run this and see whether we are getting these informations or not here. So what I do here, like t dot t, have we already defined the t anywhere? No. T is everything looks good. So yeah, it looks good. Teacher new teacher object. So let's call that function, and then we'll see what is happening here. Display teacher, that looks good for me. Can be something. Yes, I'm going to run that. Let's see, 1 second. T dot Oh, I didn't save, that's why it was not displaying. I didn't save whatever I added here, that's why it was not displaying, but I think it looks good. Okay, let's save this and run this for now. Unexpected new line, teacher go 18. Okay, teacher go to the line 18. Okay, so this one. Okay, I save that and come to the main again, run this. Okay, everything looks good. You can see the teacher info, teacher ID 20, teacher name hurry. What it do now, this time we displayed the teacher ID and teacher name. Let's display the student info also. So display, we know that this object is holding teacher ID, teacher name, and student info also. So here they do, I'll call I'll say that, okay, println and then students info, and then what I do, I'll use this object teacher, and then I know that using the T I can reach to ID name, and in the similar way I can reach to the student. So let's say I use the student this time, the student, and if I do dot, how many function is visible? If you guess, okay, this is the object and object of this interface, and we know that this interface we are going to expose only two functions, display ID, display name, not a display fee. So that's why if I say t student dot, you can see display ID and a display name. So I'll call that display ID. In a similar way I can say student and display name. Okay, let's run this. Go to the main. Let's save first. I save that. Go to the main. Then so display teacher. That's everything good. I'm just going to clear the screen and run again. Oh, nice! You can see here teacher name. It's a teacher info, teacher ID 20, teacher name hurry, and then students info. We are seeing student ID and student name. So in this way, we see here. I'm exposing few function of the student in a teacher. So yeah, so I have used this kind of technique in our day 3 project. Okay, so let's try that and just try yourself and try to understand this advanced concept of the interface. And that's all for the today. Okay, thank you.